from my experience, both Americans and Indians lead the world in moral lectures. We're both of our societies are.
We've
quite
been doing
good.
it longer, though.
Yes, no, you have a deeper experience. I won't deny. But kind of along these lines, I know that when Prime Minister Modi was here, a number of American representatives boycotted his address to Congress.
Some did. I don't know if I'd use the word a number.
Well, a number can be a small number. It doesn't have to be a big one. And I know I wrote a column about India in the Wall Street Journal, and I got there was a letter to the editor from Cardinal Dolan, who was a very well-respected man I personally respect tremendously, to the Journal, expressing his concern that I hadn't said enough in my column about problems of religious minorities in India. So how would you sort of try to shape the conversation, or how would you respond to some of these concerns that people have here?
It would be a mix because, I think different people, if I don't know Cardinal Dolan, I'm a little more familiar with American politicians, including members of Congress. So I'm not, I know many of them have strong views, often electorally driven, sometimes culturally driven, all of that. So I'm a little hesitant to address specific examples. But as a broad proposition.
Yes.
Look, as a broad proposition, all I can say where India is concerned is the underlying culture of India is deeply pluralistic. In fact, I cannot think of any society in the world, and I've lived in many of them, whether I look at Europe or look at North America, and North America, US is very pluralistic. China, I've lived in Russia. The diversity and the layers that you get in India, and you can slice it in different ways. It could be ethnicity, it could be faith, it could be language, it could be traditions. It's actually unique. It's truly in multiple accesses the most diverse space in the world. Now, it is something, now when you have that kind of diversity, that diversity will always have its own conversations and discussions. It will be, there will be attempts to get a certain balance right, there will be corrections, there will be recorrections. It's in the nature of diversity. The only way you won't have those dialogues is when you don't have diversity, or when you have imposed something so strong that, everything is okay in that place because everybody has either been forced to agree or conditioned to agree with each other. So we actually are a much more looser society, where there's almost a natural inclination to disagree, and that is our national character. Now, when you have people who have not come through that experience, who for them, are listening, it's like you're listening to the next room, you really don't know the people in the next room, you're picking snatches of conversation, and then you are making a judgment or an opinion based on that particular soundbite that you picked up. So, today, since you brought up the issue of minorities in India, look, what is the test really of fair and good governance, or of the balance of a society? It would be whether, in terms of the amenities, the benefits, the access, the rights, do you discriminate or not? And in every society in the world, at some point, there's been some discrimination on some basis. So if you look at India today, it's a society today where there's a tremendous change taking place, because people are the biggest change happening today in India is the creation of a social welfare system in a society which has less than $3,000 per capita income. Nobody has done that in the world before. Now, when you look at the benefits of that, you look at housing, you look at health, you look at food, you look at finance, you look at access, educational access, health access. There's no, I defy you to show me discrimination. I mean, in fact, the more digital we have become, the more in a way faceless the governance has become. Actually, it's become fairer. But as I said, this is a globalized world. There will be people, you will have people gripe about it, and much of the griping is also political. Let me be very frank with you, because we've also had a culture of vote banks, and there are sections who had, in their own eyes, a certain privileged access, who today may resent the fact that they don't. It's a phenomenon with which you are not unfamiliar. I think these will be the turbulence of a democratic society.
Okay. Well, now we in the United States have had the experience not only of lectures from India, but lectures from Canada. And, I think
They look at you as the global South.
It's one of the more interesting relationships. And I think Dean Acheson once wrote an essay about Canadian criticisms of the United States, and he titled it Stern Daughter of the Voice of God. But certainly the Canadian Prime Minister has made some serious charges recently. But I also see that from press reports that you have met while you're in Washington with National Security Advisor Sullivan, with our Secretary of State, Blinken, and that this subject has come up. Can you give us any information about how this is or isn't affecting U.S.-India relations, where this whole matter stands now from your perspective?
Okay, so let me start with Canada. Yes, the Canadian Prime Minister made some allegations, initially privately and then publicly. And our response to him, both in private and public, were that what he was alleging was not consistent with our policy, and that if his government had anything relevant and specific they would like us to look into, we were open to looking at it. Now, that's where that conversation is at this point of time. But to understand that conversation, you have to also appreciate that this has been an issue of great friction for many years with Canada, in fact going back to the 1980s. Then it became dormant, but in the last few years it has come back very much into play because of what we consider to be a very permissive Canadian attitude towards terrorists, extremists, people who openly advocate violence. And they have been given operating space in Canada because of the compulsions of Canadian politics. I don't think most Americans, for Americans, perhaps Canada looks very different. But it depends, from where the interest, where the shoe pinches. For us, it has certainly been a country where organized crime from India mixed with trafficking in people, mixed with secessionism, violence, terrorism. It's a very toxic combination of issues and people who have found operating space there. So a lot of our tensions with Canada, which well preceded what Mr. Trudeau said, actually come out of that. And today I'm actually in a situation where my diplomats are unsafe going to the embassy or to the consulates.
In Canada?
In Canada. They are publicly intimidated. And that has actually compelled me to temporarily suspend even visa operations in Canada. So as I said, often countries look very different depending on how you see them and what your interests are. But I have this problem in Canada. And so your question, did I speak about it with Jake Sullivan and Tony Blinken? Yes, I did.
And?
No. Let's put it this way. They obviously shared, U.S. views and assessments on this whole situation, and I explained to them at some length. What I gave you was a summary of the concerns which I had. So I think hopefully we both came out of those meetings better informed.
Great. Well, thank you. Well, we are about to go to audience questions, and I see I have some here. But while I'm looking at them, do you have any advice for Americans who want to learn more about India? Where should young people or older people who are interested in this, where should they go to learn about this country that is looming larger and larger in American foreign policy and in world affairs?
Look, it's hard to give general advice, but I would say, and this really flows from our own conversation today, that in whatever profession people are, I think it would be useful to try to see how that particular profession or that particular set of interests are doing in India, because there may be experiences there, there may be thoughts there, ideas there, which people would find useful. For many years, India has been an absorber, an active searcher for best practices around the world. I think today we can also contribute to best practices. I give you some very, very different examples of this. You would have all seen that our very persuasive advocacy of yoga over the last decade has improved global health. So if anybody wants to get up in the morning and wants to have a better day, I mean, my suggestion is please, look at your phone and find the most conducive yoga practice. But on the other hand, if you are someone in the digital world and you see really how creatively today, digital mediums and practices are being embraced. And I give you an example. If you are going shopping in India today, you can leave your wallet behind. You can't leave your phone behind, because most likely the person you're buying something from will not accept cash, will want you to pull out your phone, look at the QR code and make a cashless payment. Now, we are clocking, last year we clocked 90 billion cashless financial payments. Just for a reference, the US was about 3 and China was 17.6. This year we probably would exceed. I saw the June figures. It was 9 billion transactions in June alone. So I'm giving you that as an example. I mean, street vendors today will have a QR code on their cart and say, just make your payment there. So it could be digital, it could be wellness, it could be food habits, it could even be, this whole discussion today we have about pluralism, identity, culture, tradition. I think there are things to learn there, and I equally, just so that people don't think I'm back to that moralizing path, that I do think Indians too, are getting very global. There, the world comes at you every waking hour through this wonderful instrument we carry with us, and the more we absorb, the better off we are.
Okay, great. Well, now I have some questions from the audience to ask. We have one from one of my fellow press reptiles who is here in the group today, has said that President Biden appeared confident enough in the intelligence about alleged Indian government involvement in the murder of Hardeep Singh Nijjar to raise the issue with Prime Minister Modi at the G20. He asks, what have you done in response to the U.S. and other Western concerns? Maybe we've answered some of this already, but...
Sure. I think I answered that.
You've answered it. Okay, we move on. Yeah. This is from someone at a think tank. We see India playing an increasingly important role in new multilateral groups like the G20, Quad, I2U2, India-Middle East Economic Corridor, et cetera. Is the Indian government looking to utilize this diplomatic momentum to strengthen more regional groupings such as SAARC, the Indian Ocean Rim Association, particularly the IORA?
We actually have an IORA meeting next month in Sri Lanka. I'll be going for that. I think, we've even tabled an Indo-Pacific Oceans Initiative at the East Asia Summit, where we look at non-security aspects of protecting the ocean space. Today for us, the challenge is there are new opportunities, there are new combinations, and how do you do that without losing focus of what you have? So it's a kind of it's a bird in the bush and the bird in hand, but you want to keep both of them. And part of the challenge is also to keep the older partners convinced that your interest in what you've been doing for some time remains. The SAARC is an exception there. It's currently dormant because one of its members, who will remain unnamed, believes that they can practice terrorism at no cost. So that's an exception. But otherwise, we've been pretty much active, and really even the latest latest initiative we're looking at is this Middle East corridor, which has India at one end and Europe at the other. So it has, for the moment, Saudi Arabia and the UAE, but it is it's got the US as well as a kind of a guarantor partner, if you would. And it really has a lot of possibilities because, given if we can find a more seamless, effective, competitive logistics between India and Europe, I think it will have enormous consequence for the global economy.
I have a follow-up question from someone else on the same sort of general role question. How do you see India's role changing in the Middle East? And I would add, I think many Americans may understand that there's a close India-Middle Eastern relationship on energy, but also Israel is a primary defense partner with India, and then we have millions of Indians who work in the Gulf countries. So the relationship,
9 million.
Yeah, the relationship is really quite close.
Right.
How do you see India's role developing in the Middle East?
Well, I mean, you, Walter, touched on the energy side. You touched on the fact that you have 9 million expats in the Gulf. There's also the proximity, the historical connections out there. But we have to understand today that as India becomes a larger consumer, a bigger economy, our salience in the Middle East countries' calculations, especially the Gulf economies, is that much higher. For many countries, I think we are the largest trade partner of the UAE, and we would be among probably the top 3 of the Saudis. And it isn't just the volume of trade. We discovered during COVID, they discovered during COVID, that the Gulf is actually dependent on the daily food consumption for what comes out of India. So the economies have really got very, very deeply meshed. And today the Gulf itself is in transition. If you talk to the leadership in Gulf, they are talking renewables, they're talking green hydrogen. And a lot of them are very enthusiastic in terms of digital progress. So we are finding new areas of intersection with them. If you look at Indian businesses, we are today far more entrenched in the Middle East than we've been for a long time.
Yeah, I think that's right. We have a final question, and then we'll bring this part of the program to a close, which is, again, without mentioning any names, somebody's asked, as we speak today, the situation in India's western neighborhood is deteriorating at a fast pace. There could be a situation where a country could collapse or see unrest. How is India preparing for such an unknown event, or how could it prepare?
In an unnamed country.
In an unnamed country to the west of India.
There's some. We have a few countries.
There's more than one option.
Who are having problems of their own. Look, today there are countries in different parts of the world in crises of different kinds, and we have a few proximate to us. We saw Sri Lanka, which really went through a very, very, almost an economic meltdown last year, and we had to step forward because they were engaged in a negotiation with the fund, and their needs were so immediate and so serious that we actually did the largest bilateral lending that we've ever done, which was we gave them almost a package of $4 billion as a way of stabilizing their economy. The unnamed country to our west, which we are talking about, they have a much, their problems are much more long-term. They're much more deeper historically in terms of, what happens when distortions have been introduced into the natural progress of an economy. That if you have, let us say, excessive expenditure on the military, or if your borrowing has not been prudent, or if you have infrastructure which doesn't pay its way, I think there are a lot of factors there. Multiple chickens are coming home to roost at the same time.
Right. Well, thank you very much. I know we're all grateful to Minister Jaishankar for his time. I'll ask you to respect that time as we go. He has a very busy schedule today, so he and I will head out here. There is coffee and other assorted delicacies in the back, I'm afraid more American than Indian. And in 15 minutes, we'll reassemble here where there's going to be a panel discussion led by Hudson's Japan chair and a very distinguished fellow and longtime friend of India, Ken Weinstein. And so I hope to see you back for that soon. Thank you.
Thank you.